Welcome, everybody. I'm Laura DeFranco, the CEO of Brave Healer Productions, where we have a mission to change the world one brave word at a time. And today, to help me with that, I have some of the authors of a new book called Sacred Medicine, Mystical Practices for Ecstatic Living, here with me to celebrate. First, you guys, I have to say thanks to Jen Pisano. Jen, thank you so much for your mission, for your vision for this book and this whole community. We are honored to be a part of this project and your community, and we would not be here without you. So wanted to get that out of the way. Jen is an amazing woman with a really cool mission for this book. So ladies, welcome. How you doing?
Good. How are you? Thank you for having us.
You are so welcome. I am doing awesome. Listeners, you are so in for a treat today. So Katie Jo Holton is founder and creator of Shaman School, where they train high-level healers. I also have Dr. Josie Boig. Did I ruin that, Josie?
Boig is German, so that's actually correct. Bug is the Americanized version.
Bug, I knew it. And I said it twice before we started. Dr. Josie Bug is a licensed veterinarian and lifelong student of the healing arts. From herbs to oils to energy to stones, integrating ancient knowledge with modern medicine to help her patients live longer, healthier, happier lives. Melanie Weller is a medical visionary, and we're going to hear more in a minute. And Laura Mazzata is an Akashic therapist guiding light workers to the deepest, most profound and long-lasting healing. To all of you, welcome and thank you so much for saying yes to this project and for just being the badasses that you are, stepping into sharing an authentic story. But even more than that, your readers are going to enjoy your master teachings. This is a gift you guys bring to these books. So honored to have you here, and thank you for doing that. So Katie Jo, I'm starting with you. Tell us about your amazing chapter.
Well, I talked in my chapter, which is titled Inner Child Retrieval, Heal Your Past and Awaken Your Magic, about interacting with different parts of ourselves that we tend to tuck away. And kind of the vision overall is working a way of bringing ceremony and sacredness into the ordinary and 3D parts of our lives so we can live a more rich and embellished life.
Well, so give me an example of ceremony. Give me a personal example, something I might hear you talk about that you do. And I'm like, ooh, I need to start doing that.
Sure. So sometimes with ceremony, we have an idea that it's got to be this big thing with ornaments and, a huge setup. And really, I think it's, an intentional acknowledgement of where you are at or a part of yourself and bringing that forward. And so you can do this with all kinds of things from periods of your life and cycles that you're going into to simple tasks like making a social media post or sending an email or having an intention for yourself for the day.
I love that you just gave that example, because essentially you're telling us it can be with anything. And it's really about the intention that you set. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, and the intention that you set, and I think also an awareness of sort of the cycles that we go through. So as we play around with our greater awareness, being able to kind of tune into what's calling us forward and name that so that we can step more powerfully into it.
Well, so awareness is everything. You all know this, like this is what gives us choices and the ability to shift energy, shift perspective, just shift in the moment with a place that we were to a place that we want to be. So Katie Jo, I know that you have shaman school, and I'm just curious about that. Like, can anyone be a shaman?
One of my favorite questions. And yeah, I do think so. At one point in time, shamans might have been one or two people in a community that were sort of responsible with tending to the harmony within the community. And now we're sort of being called to do that for ourselves. So like many of our spiritual gifts, we all have access to them. And this can be a part of ourselves of being human that we can explore. Yeah.
Thank you. field that that is in the sacred medicine field. Like, this is part of sacred medicine. We have shamanic priestesses writing chapters for this book, you guys. We have teachers, master teachers writing chapters for this book, people who have been around a minute or two and have practiced these different things. Such gifts to give. And I really am just so grateful that you guys are willing to share. So, Josie, would you talk about your beautiful chapter next?
Sure. It's chapter 16, and I titled it Animals Are the Medicine. And I give a acupressure technique to help connect with your animal and relieve both your anxiety and stress and theirs. And I go through 4 different animals that actually were my guides and teachers through veterinary school. And I really, after 20 years of practicing, I practice traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. So I do a lot of energy work, a lot of acupuncture. And I see animals do as much healing for their people as I am doing for them and they are doing for me. So it really becomes in my sessions a triangle between the animal and the animal's human and me. And I just wanted to have people bring awareness to that, of how much these little creatures are doing for us right now.
Wow, you're not kidding. I think that that's always been a draw for me my whole life, and mostly dogs, but dogs, cats, rats, and birds, all kinds of animals have been in our homes, since I was little to now. But you're right. I think now there's a feeling of intensity and urgency. And of course, they all feel it. Mm-hmm. And they are just right there with us, right? Tell me more about that.
It came to me actually when this whole situation started and we're on even more of a lockdown. I feel like as human beings, we have become more and more separated from the ecosystem that we live in, from the earth, from the plants that give us food, from the animals that give us food, from our water, from our air. And now with this lockdown, it's been even more, our worlds have gotten more and more small. And for a lot of people, it's their furry dog and cat is the only connection back into that world of nature, or the world that is actually our life support system. And so I'm doing an online program right now where I'm guiding people through the seasons of the year, and I'm giving them exercises like going out on a walk, but letting their dog show them what they want to find out on the walk. And literally, it's really cool because the dogs are pointing out things like reishi mushrooms to their people. And they're finding all these treasures, and it's opening up their creativity and opening back up their awareness to the world around them. So.
That's wonderful. I was just chuckling to myself. You mean the dog gets to walk me? That's a cool thing. I could do that. I like that a lot. Awesome, Josie. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Melanie, tell me about your amazing chapter.
Thank you, Laura. My chapter is chapter 2, and the title is Vagus Nerve Cosmology, the Spiritual Underpinnings of Physical Dysfunction. I, like you, am a physical therapist, and I've done that for a long, long time, about 25 years. And I was an athletic trainer before I went to PT school. And I very unintentionally ended up specializing in people that had not found success in other places, and more complicated chronic pain types of cases as well. And I heard lots of stories over and over that were the same. The characters were different, but the archetype, the sense of the story was so similar between patients with pain in different areas that I knew there was something more happening here. And we know that I branded myself as a stress management expert for a long time. And we know that stress and trauma always affect the voice and the breath. And our vocal cords and our diaphragms are horizontally oriented in our body. So we embody stress and trauma on the horizontal in our body. And so the vertical structures, including your vagus nerve, which is an amazing structure that mediates stress, inflammation, pleasure, and a whole bunch of other things. It innervates our vocal cords, our hearts, and our digestive systems. But that's a major vertical structure that can get compressed at these different points. And in the midst of my own midlife crisis / spiritual awakenings, one of the things that I discovered was that mythology was a mode of communicating scientific information. So ancient myths actually tell the story of how the earth rotates and tilts over time, or it tells the story of our anatomy and our physiology. And in all of my experience in treating people for years and years, because I've always loved helping people with those spiritual underpinnings of the physical dysfunction, I've discovered that when you treat somebody's physical body, sometimes their story will change, but when you treat their story, their physical body always changes. And so I've created a form of energy medicine based on how the cosmos is literally coded into us and how story gets coded into us. And when you treat story and treat the way our bodies mimic the cosmos, you put people, or you yourself, get off the mule path and on the superhighway to transformation.
I love it. I'm writing stuff down. Don't mind me, you guys. Oh, like every time you see me looking down, it's because I'm writing your words. Yeah, when you treat the person's story, the body always changes. I have to hear a little bit more. Okay, talk to me more about that. And I'm such an anatomy geek, you guys. I love the anatomy. I don't know. I think I was just born loving it. I loved the cadavers in school, and I loved looking, and I loved being able to see the parts. So, as Melanie's talking about the vertical structures and the horizontal structures, like I see them, and it's lovely. Tell me more about treating the story. How do you treat a story?
Well, sometimes it's as easy as asking the right question. But when I treat story, I really treat the expression of their cosmic alignment in their body. So for example, the ventricles of the brain that make cerebral spinal fluid are the same shape as the ram's horns that represent Aries. And in Western astrology, Aries rules the head. And so if your ram's horns in your head are energetically asymmetrical, getting them I will say you could do all the other structural techniques you want, and it might help some, but until those ram's horns come back into symmetry, your headaches, your neck pain, whatever else is going on is going to keep cycling. And one of the fundamental questions that goes with that to me is, where are you being the hero in someone else's story? Because Aries is very much the warrior, the hero, it's Mars. And I treat a lot of women, and this is a big theme in women's lives because we're culturally conditioned to be the hero in our partner stories and in our children's stories at the expense of our own story. And so when you can help somebody come back, really realize what's happening at the story level and come back into being their own hero, then miracles happen and things just really start to fall into place. And you get in medical terms, because I train a lot of healthcare practitioners to connect these things as well, you get better patient compliance, you get better outcomes, you get people that are really motivated to make the change because they can finally see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yes. Amazing. You guys, I want the readers, listeners today, and the readers of this book to understand just what they're getting in terms of a holistic approach here. This is what's been missing from much of your care, is the way to look at everything and how it integrates and how health and wellness can come from that. Laura, talk to us about your amazing chapter.
I will. I've been taking notes too. I'm like so fascinated by all of this. It's wonderful. So I wrote chapter 9, which is chanting in the Akashic records, accessing potent healing at a cellular level. So I've been a therapist for almost 20 years. And so I've been helping a lot of people with anxiety, depression, mental health diagnoses that, to be honest, I don't really believe in anymore, and have shifted over to being a spiritual healer and teacher. And what's fascinating is how much these modalities, chanting is one of them that I'm going to talk about in a second, really provide us with long lasting change for these things that we would address in therapy on merely a cognitive level. And what's so cool is that chanting is something I just kind of fell into. You know, I just kind of started chanting one day, like it just started coming out of my mouth. And then I started to realize how deeply it would heal me, you know, and I started this path for my own physical healing. But what I realized was how much relief I received in every other area of my life. And so I love this modality because yes, when you're chanting, you're obviously using your voice, you're using your physical body, and you're generating that vibration from within you, which is so empowering because this is a tool that's coming from you, that's tangible. And it bypasses the ego, it bypasses cognition, because we're not sitting there trying to figure out what the Sanskrit words mean, you know? And so our minds can't talk back to us and say, oh, what are you talking about? Like, that's ridiculous, you know? And so it's great because I honestly have found that it's highly effective for people who are very restless or who have anxiety or ADHD, because they have this trouble focusing, but they have this repetitive mind stuff going on, right? Whether you want to call that obsessions, whether you want to call it, oh, I'm just have racing thoughts right now, or I just can't stop thinking about something. And so when you get into a chanting cadence, it's almost hypnotic. I honestly call it an analgesic for my body. When I chant, every single ounce of me is vibrating and my whole body feels numb when I'm done. It's crazy. And it's so exciting. And so I know that when I sit down and do a chanting practice, I can sink into the most chill parasympathetic state, which is the relaxation response. And I feel super grounded and just super connected to who I am. And it's something that I honestly just stumbled upon. And I'm so excited because it's really something you can implement like a mantra repeatedly throughout your day to assist you with returning to really your heart space and who you are and not get lost in the human sauce.
The human sauce. I love it.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite sound?
Well, my favorite chant is kind of complicated, which is why I didn't write that in the chapter, because I didn't want people to be like, oh, geez, I'm running away, right? But yeah, it's the Maha mantra, and it doesn't seem long when you're receiving it and you've repeated it enough times, but it's very complicated to learn. And I love it because it's the deepest for physical and emotional healing.
Awesome. I was letting you talk while I coughed there for a minute. Okay.
That's fine. No worries.
So I have experienced this and love it. And I love anything that you can do easily by yourself without any equipment that has such a profound effect. And this is one of the things. This is just one of those amazing things. So let's say you've got people in your house and you feel funny about making the noise. What are you going to tell them?
So what's funny is that my children just crack up because, first of all, I love this because I'm chanting a lot of the time and it just like randomly comes out of my mouth. And then my kids will start chanting and I'm like, ha ha, you're healing and you didn't even know it. And it gets stuck in their head because it's very catchy, you know, and so it gets stuck in their heads. But when other people are around, I usually go into my own little zone and I kind of stay there. But people that I know really well, I'll definitely break out the ohms. You know, that's the standard universal mantra.
I love it. I love thinking about people doing their chanting at home with their people and like what the response is and the reactions are. Such powerful sacred medicine, which gets me to a question I'm going to ask all of you. Melanie, you're first up for this one. So sacred, you know, we're putting two words together that sometimes people wouldn't put together. If you were conditioned to understand what medicine is supposed to mean, you've got certain ways you're thinking about that. But we want people to understand what sacred medicine is. Talk to us about how it is, what it is to you.
I would say that the lack of a cohesive cosmology is the source of all of our ills.
Oh my gosh, explain that, please.
And so like Descartes is usually credited with separating the divine from the mundane and saying that reason is this, or logic is the sum of everything. And we are so much more than logic. And I've treated people that have presented in highly illogical ways for years and years, yet there is always a logic to it. But my patients didn't read the textbook before they showed up in my office. And sometimes I have to read their textbook before I can figure out what's going on. They're not going to respond to the normal textbook approach. And so I don't think we lose anything by making medicine sacred. We make it better. It's not about taking away the amazing things that medicine does. Modern medicine does tons of absolutely amazing things that help us on individual and community levels. But so many people, or I see so many people that fall through the cracks, and we're so much more than that. And when we really talk about treating someone as a whole being, that we need like whole system paradigms without necessarily needing to give up medical specialties, because those are equally valid. So what we need is a language that everybody can speak in that starts to connect all of these dots. And that's part of, or a huge part of what I'm bringing forward.
Yes, I think what all of you are in your ability to share. I often think of us brave healers as bridges in communication, so that we can bring some ideas that old conditioned sort of habitual ways of thinking about what medicine is or should be or all that stuff, to the very other end of the spectrum of ways that have scared people to talk about, and then bringing it together. You all are beautiful bridges in communication for all the people who need to hear it in exactly the way they need to hear it, right? Awesome. Katie Jo, talk to me about this in your world. When you think about sacred medicine, how do you think about this?
Such a fun question to explore. I guess I want to start with medicine and what that means to me, which is really an opening. So whether that's going to a medical doctor to find an opening in something, or having somebody speak a word in a way that lands in your system to open things up, this is what I think of as medicine. So where we are closed, and the sacred part, again, kind of going back to the ceremony piece and having that intentional practice of interacting with the ordinary mind in a way that makes it extraordinary and makes us find places where maybe we've tucked away parts of ourselves or aren't free, and open that up so that we can be free.
I love the way that you're talking about that with opening and opened or closed. It's a really interesting way to think about that. Medicine can be the opening, right? So how do you, is it, maybe you guys will think this is a funny question, but you've heard people like, they don't know there's something to heal. Like, how do you help somebody toward what is an opportunity for an opening? I'll use your word, Katie Jo. What else would you say about that if they don't know what they don't know?
Mm-hmm. I think a lot of us, myself included, of course, put a lot of energy on things that we're trying to hide. And so it can become kind of unconscious for most of us. So I guess kind of speaking to the opening piece again, when we're putting a lot of energy on hiding something or tucking it away, it kind of makes this heaviness in the system. And so for practitioners, I find it's helpful to kind of tune into that heaviness and figure out what that's attached to. So again, we can create the opening for ourselves through awareness, or asking questions, or applying medicine in a way that opens up the system again, so that we can see all of the energy we put on hiding something from ourselves. And then again, that just like opens it all up. So we're not spending all of this energy trying to like push something down or tuck it away. A friend actually used this term recently. She said, like trying to push the beach ball underwater. It's a lot of energy.
Yes. I love that example for the listeners, because they may, be hearing that and think about something that they've been putting a lot of energy into, shoving down, hiding, ignoring, let's not go there. That's a really a wonderful way into this world that we're all inviting them into, a possibility for healing there. Yeah. Laura, what would you add to this talk about the sacredness of the medicine?
Yeah, so I actually think there's two components to this. I think that one is people really listening consistently to their bodies, right? And so we're getting so much communication from our physical body all the time. And the fact is, our soul chose to incarnate in these bodies at this time for a reason. And so it's really allowing the wisdom of our bodies that are carrying energetic codes from our ancestors, from past lives, from past experiences that we may not consciously understand. And so when we listen to that, it allows it to be sacred because it's very unique to us, right? And our journey. And the second part is making sure that you're also connecting to and understanding your soul's purpose, because there's what we're currently embodying right now, but then there's understanding, like, what do I need medicinally in order to fulfill my soul's purpose in the way that I'm meant to within this lifetime. And so embodying both is the challenge, right? That's the challenge here on this planet, because we're spiritual beings in human bodies. And so it's being able to marry both of these signals together to have our own unique medicine in a way that is different from everyone else, because we have our own path.
I love hearing that piece, because that's sometimes the problem with a prescription.
Yep.
It's the same thing for everybody, and everyone needs a custom made sacred medicine, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's why these prescriptions and procedures and cookbook healing doesn't work, or it works only temporarily, or right. Oh my goodness, don't get me started on that topic. We'll go down the wrong hole on that one. Josie, what would you add to this conversation about the sacred medicine? Why sacred?
Why sacred? I come to this with kind of a unique viewpoint, because I was traditionally trained in medicine, in Western veterinary medicine. But before I went to veterinary school, I've spent a lot of time with just different traditional healing modalities. And that's part of the reason why I chose the 5 elements in traditional Chinese medicine, is because it's based on one of the oldest known cosmologies that we have left on this planet. It's literally goes back over 5,000 to 6,000 years. And in those cosmologies, there's no separation between the emotional, the spiritual, and the physical, and the mental. It's all tied up in one. And there's no separation between the individual, the family unit the individual lives in, the ecosystem the individual lives in, the plants and everything else that they're around, from the climate to everything. So it's you're working with one giant interconnected web of life. And it's a matter of finding the balance, because we're in a constant state of change, and it's dancing within that. It's like the dancing Wu Li masters, but you're dancing within that constant state of change to find this dynamic balance. So that to me is what is sacred. I mean, you can turn anything into sacred, and I use everything from prescriptions, but if you're going to use a prescription, you should know the energetic pattern you're using that prescription for, and each individual person is going to react differently depending upon their makeup, depending upon their Jing essence, their Qi, what they inherited, what they're taking into their body through their diet. So all of that is interconnected, and you can't really separate one from the other. Just
Yes. The integration is the key, and having master healers and teachers and all of you who step up to look at the whole being in all of the ways that you are holistic. I think that is what starts to break through people's patterns of what hasn't worked yet, what hasn't worked before. People have so lost hope sometimes in chronic pain situations, illness, disease situations, but when you have a practitioner who comes along and starts to ask questions you've never been asked before, starts to go and integrate those different places. And I just feel such hope in the moments of talking about that and what you all do that way, that I want to continue to encourage our listeners and our readers. Hey, you may have tried 10 things and so far it's not working, but there is an 11th thing and it's going to work. And, don't lose your hope. And we bring a lot of that integration with us in these books. So I'm going to ask you all the next question. Laura, I'm going to start with you on this one. And we chose different words for the title of this book, and one of them was ecstatic. So ecstatic living, okay? We're not just talking about living, we're talking about ecstasy, ecstatic, blissful living, right? And we want our readers to understand what is possible. And there was a point where my knowing there was more to life was literally screaming inside. I hadn't really been listening to those whispers. And Laura, you talked about this body, listening to the body. It's been really important for me. So my body started to shout louder. In my case, it was chest pain. It was a big deal. But I think a lot of us got really good at ignoring the whispers, good at the suffering. And it's kind of time to understand what's possible in terms of joy or even ecstasy. So what do you want to tell us about living an ecstatic life, about what's possible?
I love this topic. I talk about this all the time because it's so big for me. Before I started this path and I had my spiritual awakening, and I've always been spiritual, but before my awakening, I was freaking great. My life was great. I had an absolutely flourishing private practice. I have 3 beautiful children. I mean, my marriage is wonderful. Like, I was very happy. But what I didn't realize was that there was phenomenal and ecstatic. And so what I find is that the more that I let go and the more that I surrender and I don't attach to my agenda and what it is that I think I need to do, whether it's a message from my physical body or a concept that's coming forward in my mind, the more that I listen to those messages, the more easily things flow, right? Because what I'm doing is I'm just like Josie was talking about, letting your dog take you on a walk, right? Let your body take you on a walk, right? Let the universe take you on a walk. It's sitting back and like waking up in the morning and observing. This is one of the tools I always give my clients. I'm like, when they're starting out, I'm like, when you wake up in the morning, just practice listening to your energy and allowing it to guide you for an hour, for 15 minutes, for the half of the day, for the whole day, if you'd like. But just allow it to guide you. Do you want to have breakfast or do you want to go outside first? Do you want to have a cup of tea or do you want to call your mom? Like, what is it that let your energy lead you, and you will find how much more flow and ease comes into your life, and you have so much more space.
Call your mom. Call your mom, everybody. Call your mom. No, that was so funny. I heard that. I'm like, of course it's call your mom.
Right?
I love that. And I love listening to that wisdom. It will never steer you wrong, usually. Melanie, talk to us about this in how you're bringing that into your life. How do we go for the ecstatic? What do you think about this?
Yeah, well, first I want to echo what Laura said, because I use a little bit of a different process, but for the exact same purpose of having people have a conversation with their bodies to guide their life for as much of the time of the day as they can. And it's so incredibly powerful. One of my favorite sayings is a South American proverb that says, your future is behind you, propelling you forward, and your past is in front of you, waiting for you to make peace with it and clear your way. And in terms of pleasure, I really love this topic, and ecstasy, I really love this topic around the vagus nerve, because sexual arousal is a parasympathetic function. And so the vagus nerve is highly involved. And in women, the vagus nerve innervates the cervix. And women with complete spinal cord injuries can achieve orgasm with vagus nerve stimulation. There's research to, or with vagus nerve stimulation of the cervix, there's research to support this. And so your vagus nerve is so fundamental to your pleasure. And it's always been one of the, like, just a really happy side effect of my work, that people would come back for a second visit and they'd be like, what did you do? It's like, now my sex drive is through the roof, or now my orgasms are different, or, there would be some positive sexual impact just from treating their back pain or neck pain or whatever else, whatever they were coming in for. And, whenever we, all the tools that we use them to get a shift in consciousness, no matter what that is. And so whether you're using diet or, one of my vagus nerve exercises or a shamanic technique or a prescription from your doctor, you're doing it to try to get your healing is always a shift in consciousness, or inflammation is a state of consciousness. I'll say too, whatever's happening is a state of consciousness. And so you're using these tools to shift your consciousness. And for me, treating your body in the way that it mirrors, or in the way you are literally a fractal of the cosmos, is really treating consciousness directly. And it's, the game I've played with myself for years and years is, what 1, 2, or 3 things can I do to make 10, 20, 30 things better for this person? And that's what I really love about this work. And we're creative beings. We are designed for ecstatic creation.
I love that. I'm writing that one down too. We are designed for ecstatic creation, people, right?
Yep. Whether you're making love or babies or business or art,
Nice.
It's all supposed to be, it's all ecstatic creation.
Nice.
Or it all has that potential.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Okay. So Josie, what do you want to add to this conversation?
My version of ecstasy is to just see if you're a dog owner, when you've been gone for 8 hours or you've been out of town and you open that door and that dog is there to greet you, and
We
their
all want to
whole
do that.
body is wagging and their whole tail is wagging, and they jump up to give you licks and kisses. Our dogs especially out of any species, have so much to teach us about joy in life. I mean, a tennis ball can be like the most ecstatically blissful thing for a dog. They bring us back to that simple joy in life. And I mean, that's pretty much all I have to want to leave people with, that picture in their head. It's just, I've been really lucky. After I do think I totally agree with Laura, like people waking up in the morning and just coming back to presence. And that's why actually in my online group, I'm doing a weekly meditation for people of just watching your breath. You're not going off into pretty pictures or fairy tale lands. You're just watching your breath. And by watching your breath, you're feeling where your body's at. And I think it's also a very feminine thing to follow our bodies as to what we're going to be doing, and get out of our heads and down into our hearts and follow that, instead of having this to-do list and everything lined up and scheduled and everything. Just relax a little bit and be present and bring some flexibility and flow in your life.
I love it. Thank you, Josie. You're giving the picture of the dog wag. All I have to do is go upstairs for a double dynamic duo of that. I love my dogs. Katie Jo, add to this about ecstatic living.
I'm going to tag along to the ecstatic living as joyful living. And, there's a couple pieces here too. There's like adding there's having a practice of asking for what we want and following our desires. And then there's also a piece of changing the frame on what we think of as bad or scary or fearful. And so, yeah, having a practice that takes a look at the things that we least want to say or do, and going towards that is actually where the opening can be, and where we can receive more joy and ecstasy in our lives and retrain ourselves that actually that's not scary. Even though a lot of times when it comes up, we're like, oh, please don't make me say the thing or do the thing, right? And then we have our mind comes in and tells us all the reasons why we shouldn't. And that's where we get into the anxiety and the fear and all of these thinking mind things. And actually, like right on the other side of that is, again, the opening. So I feel like as important as it is to follow our desires, it's also just as joyful to follow our fears.
I am glad that you went at this that way. And it has been coming up in other interviews. And it's something that I want listeners to truly understand at another level, that the best moments of joy can be found when you face the ugly stuff, the stuff that looks like you want to run away. And there it is right there. So whatever your moment is there's an opportunity. So of course you can choose a joyful thought in the moment, but when you're really faced with pain, I could be asking you all the devil's advocate question, but Katie Jo, I've been in pain forever. And like, how could this be a good thing? And how can going there help me to get there? This place I want to be that's way more joyful or ecstatic, right? Do you want to answer that?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is actually just the reframe on what's good and bad anyway. And so often, let me see if I can say this in a clear way. A lot of times what we think our problems aren't actually a problem. It's that we think that they are a problem. That is the problem. Right?
Yes. Yes.
Yep.
And a beautiful way to have an opening is to observe your own thinking. Oh my gosh, the gift of that awareness of observing our thoughts. Okay. You amazing author people, we're going to do one last speed dating question. Are you ready? This is not something you're going to want to answer in a quick way, but I'm going to challenge you. And Josie, I'm starting with you. So, we're talking about joy. We're talking about ecstasy now. And we have had probably, or many people have had the worst, hardest, most challenging year of their lives. We've been in this situation that we've been in. We record this interview today in, a year and a half into COVID and all of the things that went along with that. And there are people who are just still stuck in whatever that is. So what I want you all to offer today as a last little nugget is for someone who's stuck, what would be one simple stepping stone for them today? Josie, let's start with you.
Go to the place of stuckness. I mean, I think from a spiritual perspective, there's a reason we're all sent to our rooms, and that we really need to go in, and you're not going to get free of whatever it is until you go in and look at where you're stuck. Like dive in. Just it's like those deep divers on the Olympics. Dive off that.
I wrote a poem about cannonballing into it. Like just run, jump, and cannonball. Yeah.
You've got to do it for everybody's sake. I think the animals can teach us that too. I treat a lot of pain in animals, but they take on a lot of our stuff. Do it for their sake. If you have a problem doing it, but do it.
Thank you. Laura, how about you? What's one little stepping stone you'd offer today to our listeners?
I would say it's connection. I think that it's a combination of connection with yourself and connection with others, primarily like a soul tribe, because I do firmly believe, especially when going through something we've been through over the past year and a half, that our nervous systems aren't fully grounded and they're not feeling fully safe. And so when you're in a community or you have a tribe, or you have, even if it's just a few people, that you have that holding space for yourself while you are turning towards the stuckness, while you are looking for this opening and excavating.
Yes, it was what I was thinking as Josie was talking. Some of that work is done alone, and a lot of it doesn't have to be done alone. A lot of it can be done in community. And I want listeners to understand something today, that you're staring at beautiful people who really care about your journey right now. Mm-hmm. And if you're listening to this today and that resonates, in a minute, I'm going to tell you about a community you can come on into on Facebook and rub elbows with our authors and ask questions and continue the conversation, right? We're offering the community, not just the book. And so it's a powerful thing to connect. Thanks, Laura. Katie Jo, how about you? Give us a little stepping stone into that.
I just want to tag on. Thanks for mentioning the connection piece, Laura. I think that's powerful. I think that's a bullseye. A practical thing that comes to mind for me is most of us have kind of trackers. So we're kind of constantly calculating the goods and the bads and the wins and the loses. And so, a quick way to shift this is to start tracking the celebrations and the joy and the wins. So if we have all of our energy tracking the things that we don't want, then the universe is like, oh, that's what you pay attention to. Here's more things that you don't want. And when we can shift to like tracking and making that automatic to kind of celebrate every time we have a great thing happen, then the universe is like, oh, you like that? Here's more of that for you then.
I love that one too. I had a moment this week about that, and I'm a pretty good joy tracker. But it was just like, things happening in the house, and we're just doing our thing day after day. And so you guys are going to think I'm so corny, or maybe you won't, but I printed out smiley faces from my computer and hung them on strings and tied them to the ceiling over our dinner table the other night. And the kids are walking in like, what are we doing? I'm like, we're just going to celebrate tonight because we're together and we're alive, and it's fun to look at a smiley face, So I like thinking of creative ways to track stuff like that. Okay, Melanie, you're going to close us out today. So what would you offer our listeners, that one little step they can take?
Inhale into the backside of your heart.
Ooh.
Our freeze responses are on the backside of our bodies. And if you're really stuck, you might be in freeze mode with your nervous system. And one of the easiest and most beautiful ways to get out of that is to breathe into the backside of your body, especially the backside of your heart. It helps your vagus nerve. It helps inflammation. It helps a whole bunch of things. And you could breathe into as many parts of the backside of your body as you like. You could breathe into the backside of your knees, into your backside of your pelvis, the backside of your head. But the heart is especially powerful, but breathe into the backside of your body. Inhale into it and exhale out the front.
Everyone just breathe with me. Yes, I know you all did. All of our listeners just took the deepest breath. I love it. Thank you, Melanie. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
To all of you, really, thank you so much for what you're doing in the world and for being here today to share it with everyone. Thank you. So listeners, please make sure to join us on September 8th. 10 a.m. Eastern, because we're going to have a little live stream book launch party for Sacred Medicine. And that's going to be on the Brave Healer Productions Facebook page. And we're going to have some cool giveaways that day from our authors and practitioners. You're not going to want to miss that opportunity. So they'll be there with their wisdom and inspiration. And I was talking earlier about the other community that you can come into. So one of the special benefits of being here today is knowing about this Facebook group called Mystic Circle. This is run by Jen Pisano, our lead author of this book. And your authors are going to be in there and again, can answer questions, can continue the conversation that we had today. We can ignite new conversations. So many juicy conversations to have about healing and sacred medicine and ecstatic living and all of it. So I hope you guys will hop over there. I've got you all hooked up in the show notes. Take that next step with your authors. Their websites are down below. Go figure out what they're doing in the world because it is awesome. And explore and connect with them. They are waiting for you to connect with them. They really do care about your journey. And lastly, today, everybody, remember, your words change the world when you're brave enough to share them. So what if that thing you're still a little afraid to share is exactly what someone needs to hear to change or even save their life? It's time to be brave. See you next time, everyone. Thank you, ladies.